This is November the 5th, 2010. We're at the Courtside Waterfowl Museum, and I'm Connie Mason, and we will be interviewing Elmo Gaskill from Atlantic, North Carolina today. All right. Mr. Elmo, thank you for coming down today to Harker's Island, and you were visiting some folks down here anyway, and I appreciate you coming over. Let's start off, just give me your full name. And
Elmo Gaskill Jr.
Elmo, and no middle name?
No middle name.
No.
I made sure both of my children had middle names.
Really?
Because of all the forms you ever fill out, it always asks for a middle name.
Yeah.
And I never had one. And it was either N for none, or N-O-N-E, or N-M-N for no middle name.
Or N-A for not applicable.
Yeah, right. So, but I made sure both my children had middle names.
My father didn't have a middle name either, and he was from Stacy. You reckon there was something about that?
Well, it could have been, yeah.
They just didn't like. I don't know. And what
My father didn't have a middle name either.
And what was your father's name?
Elmo Gaskill.
Elmo. And where he was born?
Stacy, North Carolina.
In Stacy. And your mama's name? Full name?
Her name was Maud Smith, and she was born in Atlantic.
Mm-hmm. And what did your dad do for a living?
He was a commercial fisherman.
Commercial fisherman out of Stacy. And do you remember how your mom and dad met? By the
School in Atlantic.
Uh-huh.
And my mother quit school and married my father. And she was one of 7 children. There were 6 girls and 1 boy in her family. And all of her sisters and brother were either salutatorian or valedictorian of their high school class.
Wow.
Except my mother. And my grandfather used to say that all of his children graduated from high school except 1. And when my mother, she'd had 4 children, she went back to school and finished.
Wow.
She said she got damn tired of hearing her daddy say that all of her children graduated but 1.
She hated being that but one.
She hated that being that but one. So she went back and finished in 1947, believe it or not. And probably would have been the valedictorian of her class, except her sister was salutatorian of class.
Isn't that something?
So she didn't compete for it because she just went back in order to finish. And 1947 is the year they added the 12th grade.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's right.
46 was just 11 grades.
Mm-hmm.
But 1947 they added the 12th grade.
Did the children take that well, that they had to go one more year, the ones that were...
No, they quit. Most of them quit.
Mm-hmm.
Most, there were 4 or 5 from Cedar Island that quit, and 2 or 3 from Stacy that quit. Did not go back and finish. Of course, 1946 was, the war had just ended too, so that affected some of them. But no, they didn't like it at all.
Mm-hmm. And you have had an educational career.
Yes, indeed.
Tell me about growing up and making that decision to go into education.
Well, I went to school at Atlantic High School. Started school in Stacy, North Carolina, believe it or not, first grade. Had a 1-teacher school that had 4 grades. The teacher had 4 grades in the same classroom and had about 25 children. That particular year, 1946, there were 10 of us in first grade. We had 10 first graders. Stacy now. And the teacher's name was Lois Smith. Lois Smith was originally from Atlantic and had taught school all over the county. She had taught in Moorhead, taught in Newport. Back then, the teachers moved around a lot. They taught 2 or 3 years in one community, and then another year they'd move on around. That's like the lady named Rebecca Bell taught here at Harker's Island for a number of years. In fact, she was teaching here when they built the new school. I picture her somewhere where they're marching down the road from the old school building to the new one.
Oh, you've got a photo?
Well, I seen it somewhere here.
Okay, well, we'll have to look into that.
And her name was Rebecca Bell, and but she taught over here. And then she wound up her career teaching at Atlantic.
How about that?
But the teachers did that back in those days.
And that school in Stacy was located where?
Where the present day fire department is located.
On the same side of the street and everything?
Same location.
Same location?
Yeah, right there. And then, so in 1947, we moved to Atlantic. Daddy was a commercial fisherman, and it was easier to get to the fishing grounds that they used by leaving from Atlantic. You could save probably an hour travel time, and by boat. And
Was
so,
he fishing out through the inlet, or was he fishing?
Well, fishing through
Pamlico Sound?
Yeah, Pamlico Sound, yeah, both those places. And they long hauled in the summer and fall, and then they in the winter they oystered and set nets in the wintertime.
Did you help him?
No, I wasn't old enough then to help him. I went on through the 8th grade at Atlantic in high school there, and it wasn't, it was one of those deals where you either became a fisherman, where you went into service, or you tried to go to college. Of course, we didn't have any money to go to college, but I thought I'd try it one year anyway. So I went to Chowan College, Baptist School at Murfreesboro, and enjoyed it enough the first year that decided it'd be good to go back the second year. And the only advice I remember from my father that I really remember was, he said, you can get a lot further using your head than you can using your hands.
Wow.
That's one thing I remember him saying to me. Of course, my father had quit school in high school. He was like in 2 or 3 grades at the same time, like 9th, 10th, and 11th.
Yeah, yeah.
And but he believed in education. But my mother was a stronger believer in education, and she was more convincing that you could do more with a good education. So. And
besides the good fishing grounds, I guess the Atlantic's, the community's attitude about good education was another plus for going.
Yes, it goes back a long way. In 1905, the community got the County Board of Education, County Commissioners, to approve a special tax on the citizens of Atlantic in order to build a school and to have a high school. And then, of course...
Public high school.
Public high school, right. Of course, there were plenty of private schools, Beaufort and Moorhead, but Atlantic had the first public high school that the state paid for. And that was 1905.
And you were telling me earlier about a seaside school?
Yeah, they had.
Prior to that?
Right. Prior to that, they had a private school there called the Seaside Collegiate Institute, better known as the James Academy. And the principal of the school was a guy named James. That was his name. That reminds me of the guy that did the signs. Where'd I put that? His name was James also.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah.
Wonderful. You need to ask him that.
Yeah.
And that building was located where in Atlantic?
Near the corner of the cemetery, where the present-day cemetery is located. And then in 1923, after they voted to get money to build a new building, they took that building and moved it about 200 yards, maybe 300 yards, further up the street, and they cut the building in half and moved the building over to a different location, about 300 yards, and they dug a foundation for a basement.
Which I thought was just absolutely marvelous. Yeah. A basement in Atlantic.
Basement in Atlantic, right, in 1905 or whatever. They and then that basement they had like 3 or 4 classrooms, and then they took the building and set on the foundation and filled in the section where they cut it in two and bricked it. It was not brick before; it was wooden, and bricked that whole thing. And the 3rd floor became the auditorium. The auditorium was on the 3rd floor. And the 2nd floor was like grades 1 through 8. The basement was high school. High school was in the basement. Of course, now I got to remember now they only had 11 grades then, until 1947. There were no indoor toilets. There was no indoor water fountains. There was no lunchroom. It was just classrooms, wooden floors.
And the heat, you said
The heat was in the basement. Yeah, the heat was in the basement, and the janitor used coal. And I remember the guy actually washed shirts, white shirts, and hung them up in the boiler room with all the dust and everything, the coal dust and everything. But his name was Kelly Robinson, and he was kin to Monroe Mason.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, he used to be a lighthouse keeper, didn't he?
That's right. He was a lighthouse keeper at Harbor Island, and maybe another one of those points out there they had.
Mm-hmm. Northwest Point or something
like
that?
Yeah, Southwest Point or something like that. Yeah, Mr. Kelly Robinson.
Yeah.
And he used to wash shirts, though, and white shirts in the boiler room.
So that was after his screw pile lighthouse career.
Yeah, you're right.
He was the janitor or the maintenance man?
Custodian. Yeah, he was a custodian.
Custodian at the school. How about that?
And retired from that position.
Yeah.
Sure did. In fact, my high school graduating class dedicated our annual to him. Our high school annual was dedicated to Mr. Kelly Robinson.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll get a copy. Look at that.
And
and you had so there was no cafeteria, so everybody brought their lunch.
Bought their lunch, or else if you lived in Atlantic, you could walk home and eat lunch.
Mm-hmm.
You could get back in 30 minutes. So I did, because I only lived about a quarter of a mile from the schoolhouse.
Right.
I remember a guy named Mac Twidley, Twidley. I guess I don't know where the old man is. The guy is now, maybe dead, I don't know. But anyway, I used to carry Mac Twidley home with me for lunch. And Mama would have on many occasions white beans and hot light rolls. And he thought that was the best meal.
He had good taste.
It was good.
Yeah.
But Mac was poorer than I was. But think about back then, all of the kids were at about the same economic level. We were all poor, but we didn't know it.
Yeah.
We didn't realize it or didn't care. Only a few, like if your parents helped run a store or a fish house or something like that, you might have better clothes or better shoes or whatever. I remember when I was at school at Stacy, and we were poor, we just didn't know it, as I said. My grandfather was in the Coast Guard, so he had a good job. Mm-hmm. And he had a car. We didn't have a car, but my grandfather had one. And he would let my daddy use it on different occasions. We rode the bus. We used to have the seashore bus around.
Yeah, that used to run down.
Beaufort, back each day. And I knew what I was going to say, the shoe business. I remember going to school, and the shoes I had holes in the soles. And we would take the Sears Roebuck catalog, the thicker pages, and take and fold them and put them in the shoe.
How about that?
In the wintertime especially. But you tried, we didn't try. You tried to avoid mud puddles. Don't get in mud puddles.
Wet those pages.
You wouldn't get those pages wet, or use a piece of cardboard, and once they got wet, and your feet would be wet. But those were the days, But everybody was about the same boat, really.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking about boats, did your father name his boat?
Yeah, he named it for my brother. Yeah.
What was it?
My brother's name was Danny. Daniel James was his name, and the boat was named Danny J.
Danny J.
Danny J.
And what kind of boat was it?
It was a boat that my mother's brother-in-law built at Marshallburg.
Mm-hmm.
Milton Willis.
Milton Willis built
the boat. Round stern, about 44 feet. Bigger than the Jean Dale out there. Outside here. She was bigger than her. And it was a brand new boat my father had built in 1944. I remember, because it was the year my brother was born.
Wow. And that's why he named it for him?
Yeah, I named it for my brother.
And how many kids were in your family? 5. And you fell in where?
Middle.
You were in the middle.
I was in the middle. I was the third.
Name them for me. Name your
Verena, Elaine, myself, Daniel, and Anthony. Anthony, my younger brother. And look, I'm the last of the Mohicans. They've all died. They all had some form of cancer.
Really?
Sure did.
Oh, no.
I was lucky I had heart trouble. Well, may not think so, but it was. Because they're gone and I'm still here.
There you go.
But my sister was like 75 when she died of former cancer. My older sister, Verena, and my next sister was 72, I think.
Do you mind me asking how old you were?
71.
71.
Sure, and will be 72 in January, if I make it January.
You will.
And some folks say, "Well, you don't look that
You
old."
don't. You don't.
I say, "Well, it's because I used to hang around with young people a lot."
That's right. That's right. When you
And
were
I think it did make a difference.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, a lot of young folks.
So you graduated from Chowan?
No, I only went to Chowan 1 year.
1 year, but
Right.
you said you liked it. You thought you
Yeah,
would
it was.
you thought you'd go back.
Right, I graduated from Atlantic High School, 57. Went to Chowan in 58. Transferred to East Carolina in 59. Then I went to the Coast Guard. Had to drop out of school to go to the Coast Guard to fulfill the contract there, but only went for like 6 months. And then I came back and went right back to East Carolina. Graduated from East Carolina in 61. 62, I got a job teaching at Atlantic.
Oh yeah.
So it's unusual that not only did I go to school there 11 years, I taught there 4 years. Then they consolidated East Carter, you know, and so I left. I left and went to Greenville 1 year. Went to a school called Belvoir, Falkland, out on the west side of Greenville. And I coached basketball there and taught there that 1 year. And the next year I had a chance to go to Fort Barnwell in Craven County as principal. So I graduated from being a teacher to principal. I only taught in the classroom 4 years.
Well, isn't that's unusual
Yes,
now?
it was.
Because now you'd have to take a whole new get a whole new degree to even be a principal.
Just about, yeah. It's a whole
Yeah.
new deal today.
Yeah, yeah.
But I went from the classroom after 4 years of being in the classroom. Let me take that back. I actually was at Atlantic 4 years as a teacher, 61, 65. Then I was in Greenville 1 year as a teacher, so it was 5. And then I had 2 years as a teacher principal, where I had to teach half a day.
Right.
And then was principal all day, you know.
Right.
And then that was at Fort Barnwell in Craven County.
Did you teach a lot of subjects or just one specific subject?
Not history, health, and PE, basically.
History, health, and PE.
Yep.
So that explains today why you're so active in your community history.
Well, in a way, yeah.
Because you love it.
Yeah. And it was neat.
So you're 6 months in the Coast Guard. Where were you those 6 months?
I was at Portsmouth, Virginia.
Uh-huh.
On buoy tender.
Tell me that story about going up there and having to tell about where you were from.
Oh well, that was the year before when I was with Mr. Monroe Mason. He was a chief boiler tender on the Coast Guard cutter Jonquil, and I reported aboard. And I was just on there for 30 days. And I met Chief Mason, and he said, asked me, he said, "Well, Gaskill, where are you from?" And I said, "Well, I'm from a little community called Atlantic down in Carteret County." And he just smiled. He didn't say anything more. So, but for about a week, though, he would ask me different questions about Carteret County or Atlantic and so forth. So I didn't really say anything, you know, except it came up one day that came back and I asked him the question. I said, "Well, where are you from, Chief?" He said, "I'm from Atlantic, North Carolina." So I was real surprised. But he had grown up before I had got out of high school. I didn't know him.
Right.
But it was really neat. Chief Mason, he was a nice fellow.
And so your history work has been with the Hunting Quarters Primitive Baptist Church a lot up there in the community.
Yeah, my grandfather was a deacon at the Primitive Baptist Church for about 60 years. From he and my grandmother got married in 1903. Got a picture on the wall there in the church. I should have gone over those items more when the group was down there. But he was a member of that church from like 1903 to 1968.
Wow.
He died in 68, and he was deacon, elder, whatever it was called at that time, for about 65 years. I remember going to church with him when I was, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And it was a long session, sitting and listening to all those Primitive Baptist preachers. And my grandfather loved it. And so he was the next to the last deacon there. There was a guy named Ben Salter, who was the last deacon, and then a lady named Eva Taylor Hamilton, who was the last member.
Was that the same Ben Salter from Portsmouth?
That's him. Yeah, that's him.
And
he was Mary Salter,
Mary Elizabeth Salter's father.
Right. Father.
And Dot Salter.
Dot, right.
His
he got a brother named William Benjamin, who's still alive now.
Oh, William Benjamin. That's right. I had forgotten.
Yep. He comes to our meetings whenever he's out here. He lives in Greensboro.
I think I would like to talk to him sometime about Portsmouth. The Primitive Baptist, there was a Primitive Baptist church up in Portsmouth too, wasn't there?
No, that was a Methodist.
That was a Methodist church.
Church. Well, there may have been some other churches there. I don't know. That's the one that's still there today.
Before your time, I think there was a Primitive Baptist church, and I think that's why probably Ben Salter was active in the one in Atlantic, because he probably didn't have any people up there in Portsmouth anymore to be with.
But now he and his brothers, there was Charlie, and Ben, and Tom, and Ross, and Dave, at least 5 of them, that used to take care of that Methodist church at Portsmouth. They're the ones that painted it when it needed painting. Those guys were painters by profession a lot too.
Oh.
Not only were they fishermen, but they were painters. And his brother Charlie got killed up there, hit by lightning. They were mullet fishing, and a storm came up, and they pulled the skiff they were in. I think this is right. Pulled it up on the shore and turned it over, and got underneath it, or maybe just left it on the side. And I think he was under there, and he got out from under there, and lightning hit him and killed him.
Oh my God! And that was which one now?
Charlie.
Charlie got killed. I believe in that 1916 picture of the class that's the one that was pointed out to me. He was the one sitting on the ground holding his foot, and I think that was Charlie. And they said he got killed by lightning.
Could be, that's what happened to him.
But wow. Well, I didn't know they were painters.
Yeah, they did painting. They did painting a lot. And they also looked out for the Primitive Baptist Church in Atlantic too. Mm-hmm. When they were there, when it needed painting or needed work, they would do it most of the time. I think get charged,
Now, is the Primitive Baptist Church in Atlantic older than the one at Cedar Island, or about the same?
Yeah, older.
It's older. And so that was so the one in Cedar Island's kind of offshoot of.
Yeah, that's where it came from. It's where in fact, I got a copy somewhere of the minutes where they asked to be excused from the Atlantic Church and create their own church at Cedar Island. Sea level, I can't remember which way it went. But we found some places where it says that the church at Atlantic was established in 1829. Uh-huh. And several other places it mentions that it's 1790. We think the 1829 is probably more accurate. But we have a couple places where it mentions about the Atlantic Church in 1790.
Well, it's a possibility the congregation was that old, and the building might have been 1829.
No. Our present building is 1918.
Right.
The other building they had was destroyed in a storm. A tornado or something hit it and destroyed it, and it was down on the shore. And then the preacher himself owned the property where the present day building is located, and he and his wife gave that piece of property to the Primitive Baptist Church.
Right.
It's 100 by 100.
The lot size.
Lot is 100 by 100. And preacher Bingo Harding done it in land. He and his wife Betty, I think her name was. And I've got a copy of the deed.
What did Core Banks and core sound mean to the people of Atlantic? I mean, did they feel like it was theirs? I mean, part of their community? I mean, this one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. You know, it was part of the community growing up. And thinking, like when the Coast Guard station was there through the 1950s, you know, they looked upon the Coast Guard, you know, as being an extension of the community. And, for example, when Mr. Hardy's daughter's husband died, they sent a message to the Coast Guard station. Somebody came over and delivered the message to Mr. Hardy for his daughter that her husband had died.
Oh,
And
so
they were involved.
They were like the hub of the community as far as relations outside of the community.
Yeah,
they're kind of the
way. Yeah.
And did a lot of, well, I guess a lot of people did become Coast Guardsmen because of that station there.
But it influenced, and not only were they stationed at Core Banks, but they were like here at Cape Lookout. I just found out in the last 6 months that my grandfather, I never knew he was stationed at
Cape Lookout?
Cape Lookout.
I remember there was a Gaskill, sure.
But I discovered he was there. He was also stationed at Shinnecock, New York, for about 6 months. Then he got transferred back to Fort Macon, and then from Fort Macon, he was stationed at Core Banks for about 12, 14 years. I'm not sure which was. Mm-hmm. And he was actually, when they retired him in 1945 or 6, they retired him as a second-class bosun mate. Mm-hmm. But everybody says he was a cook. he mainly was a cook.
But he made some light rolls for them, and they couldn't.
That was his responsibility. See, somebody had to be.
Couldn't waste that talent.
The little stations didn't have a designated cook, you know, like first, second, third class cook. But when the other rates had to do it, and so even though he was a bosun mate, he was still the cook.
How about that?
And they probably rotated it, you know. Your turn this month, and my turn next month.
Kind of like the fire stations do.
Yeah, right.
The now for a community the size of Atlantic, they had a lot of really big time fish houses there.
Yeah, it did. I was completely shocked when the Cape Lookout Seafood closed last year. But they said, you know, we're going in the hole. So you know, our light bill runs $3,000-4,000 a month from our labor we have, and you know, upkeep of this and so forth. And so they finally just shut the doors.
So there was Clayton Falter, and there was Billy Smith.
Billy Smith, the main two. John Wesley Smith Brothers.
Smith Brothers, uh-huh. And Drum Inlet Seafood. I guess was that after?
Yeah, it was long after. Yeah, and you had Dennis Mason, D. Mason had a fish house there, and
he had a store there too, didn't he?
Yeah, a store. That's where the ferry left from.
Okay.
That's where the ferry left from. There's a big 3-story house there right now.
Where would that be on this map of Atlantic? Let's see. I've got. Oh, here, just go ahead. I'd rather use a pencil. Here you go. You can just mark it with a pencil there.
Well, there's.
I know it's kind of hard to see.
There's a little port there. Okay. That's Crossman's Church, isn't it? Right there?
Yep, Crossman's Church.
That was the old Baptist church right there, 1946. So D. Mason's would have been sort of right in there.
Okay. And so that's where the ferry would leave from?
Yeah, that's where the ferry left from. Come out here to the channel. On down to Harbor Island.
So like the Alita, that would be where the Alita would run from.
Now the Alita left from Clayton's Folklorist Seafood, which was right in here, where it says Little Port. That was Clayton Folklorist Seafood right there.
Oh, where the Harbor of Refuge is today?
No, the Harbor of Refuge is further. It's further along in here.
Oh, that up near White Point.
Up near White Point is where the. Where the Harbor Refuge is. Okay. And where it says Little Port, see it's cut out in there, that's where they dredged it.
I see.
Corps of Engineers dredged it.
Okay.
And then on up here would have been where Billy Smith and John Wesley Smith were more or less in here, right here. Mm-hmm. This was man-made here. Mm-hmm. So in here they dredged it out here. It says Little Port.
And so did most of the people who own boats in Atlanta, did Was that Harbor of Refuge there then, or did
No,
they
it's
just
not there then.
they just launched it? I mean, just kept their boat out on a.
They usually kept
On a
it, well,
pylon?
before the Claytons and John Westons had their harbor in there, they tied their boats to stakes, to pylons out
In the water.
in the water, and used a pole skiff, we call it, to get out to the
boat,
to the
to
boat.
big boat, yeah.
the big boat. Then when Clayton and them, when they dug the harbor here, when the Corps of Engineers dredged the harbor there, the people started tying up in there. And then Clayton and them got bigger boats, bigger trawlers. And then John Weston and Billy down here, when they built their harbor, they tied up in there. And then once they did the harbor down here for storms, so the main harbor down here was done for storms.
So the Harbor of Refuge was a Harbor of Refuge.
Yeah,
it was
that's right,
for hurricanes and things like that.
It's for, right.
I'm going to turn this tape over for. Now Clayton's family had a place over on the banks. They still got
Still
it.
got it, still got it.
And where is that?
It's called the Pilling Terrace. It's further on.
Let's see. Is it further north?
Yeah, what's showing here? Yes, this shows up to Ira Morris's camp too.
Well, tell me about Ira Morris Camp. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, he started carrying people over for fishing back in the 40s, in the 1940s, and what they call, well, I guess it's Long Point now. See, it showed it back then as Long Point. See there? This map's 1946, and it was called Long Point then. It's still got that same name today.
And so the Ira Morris Camp is really the Morris
Camps.
Marina camps now. That
That's
we know.
right. That's
It's
right.
the
Morris
same,
Marina camps.
Same one.
Same location.
Same location. And
Now, what he used to do for a while was he would come in here, and they had a dock. They put it right on the inside here,
between Point of Beach and Horse Island. Okay.
and they would put their people off with their baggage and so forth. Then they'd take their old beach buggies and take them on up here to the camps. See?
Okay.
Then later on, they found a way to get on in here and come in here on the back side.
Probably dug out a little thing with their engines and stuff.
Yeah.
Now, do you know how Dump Island got its name, or?
Yeah, that's when they did some dredging here around Drum Inlet. See, Drum Inlet was cut in the storm in 1944.
It's really what opened that
Opened the inlet up, right? So all this area here washed through. Then they came in here and dredged the channel from here in the main channel. Right here in the main channel, somewhere in here, and they put through the sand up here, and they call it Dump Island.
Okay.
But actually, a guy named Mike Mason owned that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Mike Mason. They used to have the camps. I mean, not the camps, the places at Seagate, where Seagate is. The what is the name of that?
Deerfield Shores?
No, Seagate, 101.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Core Creek.
Oh, okay.
Core Creek. Mike Mason that had the camps there
Okay.
on this island. His son still owns it. He lives in Wilmington.
Oh.
His name is Andy. Andy Mason owns
Andy
that.
Mason.
I've seen him a couple times this summer.
How about that?
He's got a
And so
camp on it.
that's not part of the Park Service,
No,
then?
it's not. No.
How about that?
No.
But that's off there. And and let's see, I was trying to find, now I don't know if this is the next one or not, the next banks, Core Banks, Old Channel, Inner Lump, is that too far? Or no?
Sheep on Horsepen Creek.
Coast Guard Station. This is further south.
That's Portsmouth. No, it's further
No,
north.
this is the Core South. This is the Core.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, that's Deep Point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the Core Banks.
Yeah.
This is south then.
Yeah. Let's see.
This is south. You need to go the other way, yeah.
Need to go the other way. Guthrie Hammock, is that for? Bells. No, that's Smyrna. No, that's. You know, it's throwing me. They're calling this Portsmouth, and it's not Portsmouth. It's south. See, look at there. So I'm going to turn this off for me.
Willis's Creek there by the church.
Now, my father said there was a place called Bloodfield. Do you remember that?
There's Mason Town up here.
Yep.
That's where your daddy's crowd lived. And his name Aggie Howard, ring a bell with you?
Aggie Howard?
Aggie Howard Mason.
Uh-oh.
Doug Lewis.
Doug Lewis? Yeah, I know Doug Lewis.
You know where his house is?
Yeah.
Well, that's where your old crowds were.
Oh,
there.
Okay.
And we're going to Daniel Eugene's daughters. And the Hill Boys.
Oh, yeah. In fact, that piece of property across the street from them, that was part of it.
Yeah, all the area right there.
See, Granddaddy's house used to be on the water side of the road.
Yeah,
and
remember it. Yeah.
And John, and after one of the big storms, Grandmama made him move it.
Okay.
I've got the newspaper account of him going to the court board of commissioners and asking permission to move his house across the street on his own property.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyway, so that's Lewis's Creek up there next to Mason Town.
Mm-hmm.
And you come on down by the church. That's Willis's Creek there. You go on, get your head out of town. Folklorist Creek is there, and then the cemetery there, and that's Mariah Creek.
Mm-hmm.
After you get across the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Mariah Creek. There was Piney Point right there. Piney Point, they called it.
And Cotton Hammock. Wonder how they got that name.
I don't know. And the Big Island is just about gone.
Is it?
Yeah, it's washed away. When the hurricanes we had just about got it.
And Salter's Lump?
It's still there.
Still there?
Yeah, it's still there. Somebody owns that, I think.
Now, I was looking across old Channel Point. One of the things that I think is interesting is the local names for the core banks locations. See, that's overcut there. And I'm just fascinated about, and I think while we have people who still remember using the banks for fishing and for long hauling and all that. That's open grounds. That's Ward Creek. Now I know I've got one of the other banks. Let me cut this off. I hate for. So now we're looking at Pilantary Islands.
Yeah, Pilantary. This is where Clayton Fulcher's
place is.
Place is in this area in here.
Now he used it for a hunting camp or just recreation?
Yeah, they use it for hunting and for
fishing.
That was the Swash. I remember on one occasion when it was open.
The Swash Inlet. You remember when it was open? Wow.
I remember going across it in a skiff. In a skiff. We went to the last. I think it was the last pony penning they had on Portsmouth Island, down in Portsmouth, and we drove a beach buggy up to here, stopped, got out. They had a 16-foot skiff. We got in the skiff and pulled across the inlet to the other side, got another beach buggy, and went on down to the pony penning at Portsmouth.
Wow.
And all the soldier crowd was there. But here it's called the Pilantaries, and this is where Franklin Roosevelt came and hunted back in the 20s, I think it was, when he was assistant secretary.
That famous picture of Alva Mason in the ox cart was right in there?
It was right in this area right here.
Mm-hmm.
Clay or somebody could pinpoint it, put a finger right on it. And this is where it says George's Hills.
Uh-huh.
Right in there is where we had our camp that we lost.
Well, put an X on there where you think it was.
George's Hills.
And that's where your camp.
That's what our camp was. Mm-hmm.
And did you call it anything, or just camp, or
called it Wilbur's. Wibbs. Wilbur Mason. Wilbur Nelson. Wilbur Nelson had camps there, and he was like our Morris. He rented them out to fishermen and so forth,
Uh-huh.
back in the 40s and 50s. And then later on, they just quit. They just,
Draw a little line out there and put write out Wibb's camps. And so he rented out too, just like
yeah,
Ira did.
just like I did.
And how would you get over there from the mainland?
Oh, we came
You came from Atlanta
from
too?
Atlantic, from down the channel.
Did they have a boat? They had their own boat and
Yeah,
everything?
mhm,
I'll be doggone, I didn't know that.
Yep, had their own boat, and the boat was named the Sadie.
The Sadie.
Sadie, S-A-D-I-E.
Oh, wow. And cow pen point. Must have been a cow pen there at some point, or?
Yeah, it was at some time, yeah. Down here is where Wibb's brother shot his other brother,
Oh,
hunting.
accidentally, I hope.
In a blind, yeah.
In a blind.
They were sitting in a blind.
Oh.
And there were three of them in the blind. And this brother on the end jumped up to shoot, and the brother next to him, or the one on the other side,
He jumped up too?
well, he fired.
Oh.
And killed him.
Oh, that's bad.
They buried him Christmas Day, 1918, I believe. Yep. It was a Nelson.
That's bad.
I'd take you right to his grave, to his thing.
Tell me about Cricket Island. Why you know anything about Cricket?
Never heard of it.
Never heard of it. That called Cricket Island.
No, I don't remember what I'm talking about.
Now this thing called Ann, do you
Don't know.
know anything about that?
Sand islands, I know what sand islands are.
Uh huh.
And in the summertime, they're out of water.
Oh.
It's like dry land.
Uh huh.
And then on high tide, of course, it covers it. But you can't hardly find any clams there either. It's out of water so much they can't grow.
Oh wow.
They grow further out, but that's Sand Island. And evidently, sometime it shows it here, Sand Island Inlet. There, the inlet's all up and down these outer banks, openly closed at different times.
Oh yeah, there's
This
been a
is
lot.
1947 for this one.
Well, they said they're all different, but Old House Beach. Did you ever call it that?
Never heard of it.
No.
Sand Island.
Sand Island, you have. That's interesting about Wibb's camps. I didn't know that they had that, and then Swash Inlet, and then how about the Catherine Jane Islands up there? Did you remember?
Catherine Jane was named for two of Alvin Mason's children.
Oh.
One for Catherine, she married a Mason, married Lionel Mason, and Jane. I don't remember who Jane married, but they didn't have any names. I understand, and when they came down from Washington to map the Outer Banks and everything, Alvin went ahead and gave them names, and he named them for his children.
Oh, how about that?
But there's a long hall called the Catherine Jane Hall.
Now, I want to talk to you about that too. I did some interviews with my daddy before he got sick, and he said that they did name their halls
Yeah.
for fishing.
They had places, and mostly for locations like Royal Shoal. There's a hall called the Royal Shoal Hall. And then there was like the Upper Road, RHODE. Then they had a western Upper Road and an eastern Upper Road Shoal. And schooners had one called the Schooner Shoal, Catherine Jane. Let's see. Terry, the Green something, what was that one? They have a list of halls, about 10 or 12 halls, and back then they had that many crews. Now we're down to one. Now we're down to one. They had 10 or 12 hauling crews, which consisted of at least 6 men per crew, and 3 boats, at least 3 boats, 2 for hauling and 1 for the run boat.
For the run boat.
The run boat was the boat they used to haul the fish in, bring them in.
That was before buy boats.
Well, same buy boat and run boat, same thing.
Same thing.
Same
Okay.
thing.
Daddy said, Mrs. Rudolph Mason said, that they used to do some kind of drawing from the hat to find out which.
That's right. On Sunday evening, usually the captains would meet somewhere in the stores, either Winston's or Luther's or Cecil's store, and they would put their names in a hat, put the name of the halls, like Eastern Upper Road, Western Upper Road, Royal Show, Frome's, Mary's Bay, whatever, and you would draw out which hall you had.
So all the halls were in a hat, and they would pull the one out that
each crew would pull one out. That's where you hauled tomorrow morning.
Right.
And if you didn't set their nets by 8 o'clock or so, then anybody else that wanted to come along and use take that haul. Right.
Because you were not taking advantage of it.
So if you hadn't set out by 8 o'clock or so, anybody else could have it.
How about that?
And some industrious crews, so you might make 2 hauls same day. You might haul their regular haul first and then haul your haul second.
How about that?
Or they might reverse it. Take your haul first and their second.
Because they already claimed that other haul.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, this one didn't have. Oh, I wanted to ask you about the Wainwright Islands.
Wainwright's is gone. It's just about washed away. No, I'm sorry. Harbor Island's washed away.
Harbor Island.
Harbor Island.
Is a house any part of the house that was on Harbor Island still?
It's all gone.
It's all gone.
I can remember the whole house was there.
Wow.
The whole house was there. And also, let's see. Show the light. Chain shot is still there.
Chain shot islands are still there.
The shallow, real shallow. House, it shows a house here.
But like I said, that's 1949, I think, on that particular map.
This is the pointing to Wainwright's. These beacons here, the lights and everything.
Mm-hmm. That's
real complicated getting through there. Chain shot, Harbor Island.
And this area is where Pamlico Sound ran into Core Sound.
Right. This is where they joined right here.
Mm-hmm.
Right
and
there.
Hog Island, that was where there was a community there, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Hog Island.
Yeah. They had stores there and schools.
Yeah, and that's the Luptons.
Yeah, Lupton.
Yeah,
also,
that was one of the big names there. Let's see. Now you said you remember going over on the mailboat and seeing Henry Piggott waiting for the mailboat. Just give me that picture again. That was a good picture mental picture.
Yeah, let's see. They stopped there every day, and Henry would take and had a pole skip, and he would pole out. And another time, I think maybe had an air cool too. You know, skip with air cool in it. And he would pole out and meet the mailboat, and they would pull up next to him, and they had, they'd have a bag. Remember the old bags they used to have, the white canvas bags with the locks on them, and they would take and throw him one of the mail coming in, and he would give him the one the postmistress had given him to go out, and they would exchange it, and they'd head on to Ocracoke, and he'd go on back into Portsmouth.
The visual picture that you said the other day that made me just, is that he was waiting with his pole stuck in the mud and with his arm wrapped around it, holding on to it, waiting.
Yeah, instead of anchored,
Yeah.
he'd time it where he could see the Alita coming, and he could time it how long it was going to take him to pull out there to where she
could get to her.
Get to him, and of course, he wanted to make sure that she didn't get aground, and so he would pull out there and either hold on with his oar, or if he was really early, he might throw his little anchor, wait for him.
Did you go to Portsmouth at all?
First time I went to Portsmouth was that Pony Pin I was just describing. That was probably around 1950, 51, 52.
About how old were you then?
10, 11.
10 or 11.
10, 11.
And did they, in the pony penning, did they run them through the dipping vat? Is that what they
Not
did?
then, they didn't then, but they normally did, normally for ticks and fleas and so forth. But then, usually this was like maybe the 4th of July. 4th of July usually when they did their big pony pennings. And one year it might be at Portsmouth, next year it might be at Core Banks.
Oh, I see. So they alternated. I didn't know if they
one
thought.
One year maybe at Davis.
Oh, okay.
Davis may have had it, or Marshallburg might have. I think there's usually about 4 different locations on the Core Banks side. I don't know what about up here.
Do you know who instigated the pony pennings?
Yeah, people like Claude Brown, John Weston Smith. They were the ones that did the actual work of running the horses and everything, or organizing their. And usually John Weston would get a bunch of teenagers like myself and others, and Claude would have a crowd from Marshallburg. And either John Weston was probably at both places, and Claude too. And because they owned the horses in both places, they would take and buy and sell horses, and see who had had the horses from last year, and so forth, different new foals and stuff.
Was there still cattle out there when you?
Yeah, there was still some cattle out there then. That's where the state bought it.
And was there a party type atmosphere to these pony pennings, or was it serious? Or
it was both. It was both. It was a party time for the youngsters, when the teenagers and so forth. We'd run them horses from daylight. Like they would take us in their beach buggies, and we would take and go across to maybe to the Coast Guard station, get on a bunch of beach buggies, and drive up to Drum Inlet. But at that time, when the deer was the pen was at the Coast Guard station, to the south of the Coast Guard station, a quarter mile or something. And so they'd take all the teenagers, 8 or 10 of us, 12, whatever, plus a couple of guys on horseback. And we would go all the way up to Drum Inlet. And then we spread out from the ocean right on to the sound. Maybe you might be 100 yards, 200 yards apart. And we would take and start walking back, running the horses in front of us to keep them, and try to keep them from trying to get around us. Sometimes they go all the way, they go to the ocean and get around us, and they'd have to come with a drink, beach buckets again, load us up, and we'd go back and do it again until we could drive them all the way to the Coast Guard station. And it usually lasts until about lunchtime, 3 or 4 hours, something like that. Actually,
that was hard work.
Well, it was, yeah. It was rough work, barefooted, sun burning on you and so forth. And usually when we got them in the pen, somebody there would have drinks for us, or I don't even remember, maybe some canned beans, or I'm not trying to think of cans of.
Vienna sausage.
Vienna sausage and crackers, right, exactly. Vienna sausage and crackers, and that was our lunch.
Daddy still had a taste for them. It didn't matter. You know.
The only time I liked them was when they had a bank.
That's right. On the boat.
On the boat. So on the boat, right.
Yeah.
And then they'd take and they'd figure out who the new horses belonged to, and they would brand some of them. And then if they sold some, they'd have a barge or haul net skiffs, big skiff there, and they'd take the horse and tie them up and put them in the skiff, and tow the skiff home with the barge. And then whoever bought them would take them on with them.
Did anybody try to ride any of those horses, break them while they were there? Or?
No, I don't remember that. No, I don't remember that.
I remember on Core Banks, somebody got killed. A horse fell on them or something. I don't know if they were trying to ride them or not, but
don't remember that.
Okay.
It could have been, so then by the time you got them in the boats and skiffs and so forth to go on home, it was probably late afternoon then. And you headed on back.
Well, I really appreciate you coming to talk to me today, and I know it's tiring, but you've got so much information, Elmo, and I really appreciate your efforts here today help us remember
Glad
and
to.
document the.
Right. We're
The
busy
community.
working with the Hunting Quarters Primitive Baptist Church Restoration Project, and we're working with that real strong. There's about 20 of us. And we have monthly meetings, what I say, call a history meeting, and usually there'll be anywhere from 10 to 12 or 14 of us gather third Monday in the month, and we'll meet for about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. And, people will bring objects.
There was a Primitive Baptist Church at Portsmouth, so if you run across anything like that, save it for us, and I'd like to get a copy for it, for the files, and because I'm sure you'll run across something sooner or later.
But if I find that picture that your father was in when he was on the basketball team, I'll try to get you a copy of it.
Well, and I've got my camera. I could take a picture of the picture.
Of the picture, right.
And that would be so neat.
Okay.
But thank you so much for sharing your things
right.
today, and I might call on you again.
Okay, if you have another group wants to come down and bring them on.
Do the tour? Absolutely.
Yeah,
that was fascinating. You know, that one man that was in the. I'm gonna cut this off now. Thank you, Elmo.
You're welcome.